Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip. Wow, how life has changed. Donald Trump is out, and Joe Biden is now the president of the United States, while Kamala Harris is the first woman vice president who's also Black and Asian. It's a done deal. The road was long and deadly, but democracy prevailed. We'll take a look at the inauguration and a look back at the bloody insurrection. This is Let It Rip. On January 20th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris took the oath at the Capitol, but it looked a lot different than previous inaugurations. Instead of thousands of supporters celebrating, flags served as a grim reminder of the more than 400,000 lives lost in the pandemic. Meanwhile, D.C. was on high alert with 25,000 National Guard troops protecting against another attack from extremists, white supremacists, and Trump supporters like the one on January 6th. We'll talk about that later. But the day was successful, and America breathed a sigh of relief while celebrating the new administration. Here to take a look at the inauguration and the new administration, we have Thelma Watkins, a former New York City Housing Authority official running for mayor in Freeport. The Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at Baruch College's Marq School of Public and International Affairs, Dr. Patria de Lancer Julnes, and an Associate Professor of Political Science at York College, Dr. Michael Sharpe. Michael, your reaction to Inauguration Day?
It was really a breath of fresh air. I think it really was a return to decency, to civility, in contrast to President Trump's American carnage speech, right, at his inauguration. Also, it was indeed a transformational moment, right, with both with President Biden being the oldest sitting president, and as you mentioned, Kamala Harris being the first Asian, the first Black, the first female vice president. And I very much like the return to decency and also the advocacy around democracy.
Yes. Thelma, how big do you think that this is for children, especially little girls?
Oh, this is really awesome. It's a tremendously big thing for little girls to have a first African-American vice president female for them to look up to. It's definitely made history for everyone, which is why we all go around wearing our pearls. Yes, because she is definitely an inspiration, a breath of fresh air, something of hope that we can all look forward to, something for the little children to all look up to and, find hope and inspiration in. It's really a wonderful thing.
Patria, how about for those who just lived under the previous administration for the last 4 years?
How about for those who lived? Oh my goodness. I have to tell you that as I was watching the inauguration, I felt that there was no other candidate out there who could deliver a speech of unity, of Viva Democracy, like Joe Biden did. I think it really took a huge weight off our shoulders. And I have to also say that as I was watching, I was scared because, after the 4 years, I thought, what if something happened to them now, precisely after what happened the 2 weeks before? And I didn't stop worrying until they walk away and they made it to the White House and made it to this respected destination. I think that now when I look at the news is to see what do we achieve before, whereas before it's like, what's wrong now? So I really think that for all of us, it's just gonna be less anxiety in many ways. It's not gonna be the road, it's not gonna be easy, but we know that there's a lot of work, but there's going to be less anxiety, I think.
Yeah. They hit the ground running with Harris swearing in 3 new senators. That gives the Democrats a 50-50 split in the Senate, and making her vote the tie-breaking vote. Biden signed 17 executive orders, memorandums, and proclamations the first day, including everything from mandating masks in federal buildings to revoking the Muslim travel ban and halting construction of the border wall, extending DACA protections. Michael, it seems like an ambitious start. What's your thought on that?
I think compared to what we have just lived through, I think it is the least that we can do. I mean, I think in terms of the plan, President Trump's administration poo-pooed expertise in science. You remember Dr. Atlas, right, who was actually not even trained as an epidemiologist, right? He was actually a radiologist. So I think now we actually have a national plan for the first time, and initiatives, right, to actually get people vaccinated, and instead of relying on the states to do it piecemeal. So I think that the plan is the least that we can do, and I'm very hopeful that it will be successful.
Thelma, I mentioned the 50-50 split in the Senate. Democrats have a slim majority in the House too. Are you concerned that they might not be able to get that agenda passed?
I think that with the current situation transitioning the way it is, I think that they will fall in line and everybody will do what's in the best interest to get America back on track.
COVID is the #1 issue that the new administration is going to face. What are some others that you'd like to see addressed, Patria, and can they realistically get done?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I would like to see is some more emphasis on the criminal justice system. And I think that with Kamala and given her Vice President Harris and given her background as a prosecutor, she's uniquely suited to work on that. I also am looking forward to undoing some of the things like Schedule F, basically converting the federal government again into a place to give jobs to cronies, which the Trump passed an executive order before he left, but I'm looking forward to rolling that back. I am also looking forward to seeing more accountability. That's really some more accountability, because unless we have accountability, the things that we saw will continue to happen again. Hopeful that everybody will fall in line. I don't think that we're going to be able to do the agenda because everybody falls in line, but because we're going to have to force it in terms of going with reconciliations, budgets, and then a lot of executive orders. I already saw a headline that said that certain senators threw cold water on the immigration, which is so needed on the immigration plan.
Also on some of the COVID money as well.
Exactly, and the COVID money. So we have a lot, and I pray and I do hope, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I really wish I had that idea that they will fall in line.
Some good food for thought. Now, it's very early on, but we'll definitely be following this to see what takes place in the first 100 days. I want to thank our guests, Thelma Watkins, Dr. Patria de Lancer Julnes, and Dr. Michael Sharpe. We're going to take a break before looking back at the insurrection. But before we do, something far more positive. One of the shining moments of the inauguration was the 23-year-old Youth Poet Laureate of the U.S., Amanda Gorman. She captivated people around the world with her poetry and poise. Listen in. This is Let It Rip.
We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. Now to the double standard. The ugliness of the Capitol will forever stain the previous administration. Trump supporters, including white supremacists and extremists, attending a Stop the Steal rally where the former president spoke, stormed the Capitol and Capitol Police. All of this happening when Congress was counting the Electoral College results that would confirm the Biden win. But this is nothing new for Let It Rip. We've discussed the extremists and white supremacists before and warned that they were becoming more and more of a problem. It was a horrible scene. The police outnumbered and some seeming to sympathize with the insurrectionists. The riot resulted in at least 5 dead, including an insurrectionist and a police officer. Many saw that as a double standard, especially when comparing it to the Black Lives Matter protest over the summer. There have been arrests and officials have been fired, but now there's a spotlight on right-wing extremists. Let's discuss what happened on January 6th and what needs to happen going forward with a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the author of the book, Addressing the Myths of Terrorism in America, Celinet Duran, and the director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance and retired NYPD detective, Marq Claxton. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Mark, I'll start with you. A bad scene. Was this just bad planning on the part of Capitol Police and Capitol officials, or was there something more sinister involved here?
It was clearly bad planning or lack of planning on the part of the Capitol Police Administration, the federal government even, but there's much more of an insidious type of genesis to what occurred on the 6th, and that is that there has been a steady increase in the presence of white supremacists, QAnon, insurrectionists, Proud Boys, and they have been allowed and encouraged to cause and wreak havoc in our government. And in fact, they've really been encouraged to begin the process of dismantling our government. Unfortunately, what occurred on the 6th was not just merely property damage, and inconvenience to Congress people, but a destruction of the very core and foundation of the law enforcement community, because we had to begin to realize or understand that perhaps the call is from inside the house, that within the law enforcement community, within our government agencies and entities, there are these Proud Boy, QAnon, white supremacists, white nationalist terrorists who are planning larger and greater things moving forward.
Celinet, who are these people? I mean, where do they come from? Who are they?
Well, the sad truth is that in their mind, they see themselves as the righteous, the true Americans who see their identity under siege, under attack. They feel that they are now experiencing this othering that we people of color have experienced throughout our entire history in America. And now this is their way, because they are legitimized. They have been legitimized by the Trump administration. They are taking the Constitution into their own hands, ironically, not really understanding anything of how the Constitution actually works. And to Mr. Claxton's point, we also cannot deny the, at best, kissing cousins relationship between law enforcement institutions and white supremacy. So what we're seeing now is everything that happened at the Capitol, at best, was lack of planning, because the demographic of those who attended the protest historically have not been viewed as aggressors. At worst, what we're seeing is law enforcement doing what law enforcement does, which is adhering to the aspects of white supremacy, fueling that and encouraging it, and then helping to execute the intentions of this particular group.
You touched on something that I think is very important, and that is the fact that there seems to be a line that runs through all of this, and it involves the military as well as law enforcement. NPR came out with a study recently where they said that basically about 1 in 5 in the military leans towards white supremacy, is involved in this sort of thing. And we know that many people from the military take that service and then move on to law enforcement later on. Talk to me about that.
So what we see, and the data does show this idea of when we look at nationalist rhetoric and these aspects of preserving American identity, without wanting to say white supremacy, but entirely they're almost one and the same. We cannot talk about the history of America and ignore white supremacy in itself. When we look at the reasons for why law enforcement was initially created, for why we have the military, the first police officers were slave catchers. So for us to even try to ignore all of that and think that race or race identity does not play a major role in how law enforcement not necessarily does its job, but views its role within America. And then you have the Trump administration when, let's just take a look at the differences in the way that Capitol Police handled Black Lives Matter protests during the summer to how they handled the Capitol siege. Completely separate aspects. Now, the Black Lives Matter protests, the intention of that was peaceful protesting. Those protesters cannot be held accountable for insurrectionists that came in to try to turn it into something that it wasn't. Now, from the outset, what happened at the Capitol, we knew what they were about. Mm-hmm. We knew what they wanted to do. The president at the time pretty much sent out a call to arms. The tweet that he put out during one of his debates, stand back and stand by. To me, that sounds like that means that I should be prepared. You know, if this is an identity that I familiarize myself with, I should be prepared to take matters into my own hands by any means necessary, because that's what the powers that be told me to do.
Mm-hmm. And come to Washington on January 6th, it will be wild. Mark, how big a problem is this within police departments? Because you've been inside, you've seen what goes on. Tell me, what do you see there?
There's always been strong elements of white supremacy within police agencies. They've been embedded in these agencies since the very inception of these agencies. As Professor Duran has indicated, the genesis of policing itself is built in, slave catchers. So there's always been this kind of issue and problem in police agencies. But just to show how deep the penetration is nowadays, just consider, if you will, that you had an overwhelming majority of police and law enforcement entities endorsing this president, who was clearly, openly promoting the ideas of the lie of white supremacy and white nationalism. And you had even New York, which is supposedly a more progressive city, but their police union, who has clear understanding about who this particular president is, going out of their way to endorse them. So when you have all of these organizations saying, we're going to buy into this language, to this climate, we're going to buy into the affiliated organizations, the other people who endorse this president, and more importantly, this philosophy, because it goes beyond just the individual president. It's the philosophy and the premise of white supremacy. But that tells you just how deep and how built in and how ingrained in policing this is. Just earlier today, my concern was so great that I began sharing with my former colleagues and some people who I know are police officers now, just to be careful, as we say in police jargon, watch your six, because the enemy is within, and these people are not thinking rationally, and they are a danger. They were a danger on January 6th to the Congress people and Capitol Hill, and they are a danger to their colleagues in police agencies across this nation.
They killed one of their own on January 6th.
That's right. And that's exactly how it should be looked at. But what you'll find, Mike, it's pretty strange that there's a real eerily quiet from police organizations, many of whom endorsed the ideals of white supremacy by backing up Donald Trump and his Proud Boy QAnon nuts. So it's just strange that even now, after the killing of a police officer at the hands of these people, it is eerily silent from those very same organizations that gave their endorsement.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, how do you curb this behavior? How do you weed them out? Do you go after pensions, or how do you do it?
You keep them from becoming police officers. You keep them from becoming law enforcement officials. You keep them from positions that give them a certain power and authority. You keep them from those jobs, those positions, those powers where they can manipulate things and undermine the core ideas of this government and of this nation. And until we do that, we'll always play catch up. It seems as if we allow these individuals in with an understanding of who they are, but then we allow them to do everything they want to do, jam up the system, infiltrate our organizations, and then try to figure out how do we fix it now. The idea is to keep these people outside of these entities, your organizations, and those positions of power.
Some of that, I'm almost out of time, but how do you get them out, those who are in there now?
Well, in line with what Mark was saying, a lot of this also has to do with just increasing training. So I get plenty of students that come across my courses who are interested in becoming police officers, and not to take away from what they want to do, but a lot of it just comes with making sure that they are educated with the proper social, educational, and academic skills so that they do not keep furthering the institutional white supremacy, and understanding this idea that the way that we view crime in this country is not inherently black and white. It's on an entire gray scale. Also, to not ignore directly what's in front of them. So everything that we saw that occurred at the Capitol, this is not something new. We have seen for the last 20 to 30 years, and this is something that Dr. Silva and I addressed in our paper, where the overwhelming majority of domestic terrorists in this country are white. They are American, meaning that they are not foreign nationals. They are not foreign born. They are, in fact, American citizens. That intersectionality that exists between domestic terrorism, the military, and law enforcement. So instead of just turning a blind eye to what's directly in front of us because we're trying to play identity politics, or we're not trying to ruffle any feathers, that's where the problem comes in.
Great conversation. I want to thank our guests, Professor Celinet Duran and retired NYPD Detective Marq Claxton. Thank you both. We're going to keep an eye on this issue. Black History Month is upon us, and sadly, we've just lost a great one. Hank Aaron, the longtime home run king who was also a civil rights icon, died. A gentleman on and off the field, he broke Babe Ruth's home run record. He hit 755 home runs and held the record for 30 years. And he faced down racism and death threats while chasing that record. Hank Aaron was 86.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. Now for some final thoughts. We've seen a lot of bad stuff over the last 4 years, and it really reached a peak with the election. But many have told me that at least things seem calmer now. We'll see. The new administration is calling for unity, but some Republicans say, how can you have unity when you're impeaching a president who's already left office? That might make sense if you strip away the images of the insurrection from the argument and how it got started. Basically saying, for unity, just forget the attack on democracy that cost people their lives and tried to overturn the election. I'm pretty sure the victims' families would say no to that deal. So the new administration is in a tricky spot. They need to address the COVID crisis and the economic fallout, but with some across the aisle still determined to fight to the bitter end. We'll have to see if cooler heads prevail and cooperation grows. If the insurrection doesn't make people reevaluate their priorities, I don't know what will. That incident could have easily been much worse. And one lesson we certainly learned is that democracy is fragile. That's it for now. I'm Mike Gilliam. We'll see you next time on Let It Rip.